thank him for coming to us, and it is a great topic area with a lot of passionate people in the region who are wanting to be a part of this discussion. So I'm done talking. I just want to go ahead and introduce our presenter, Jared Cates. He is the community mobilizer at Carolina Farm Stewardship, and he serves on the interorganizational community food strategies team. Jared is an Orange County native and has worked in grassroots nonprofit organizations in the Triangle for over 15 years. For the last 9 years, his work has focused on connecting, organizing, and mobilizing community members and food policy councils around critical public policy issues. Jared holds a master's in social work from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, a certificate in nonprofit management from Duke University, as well as a bachelor's of arts in both political science and Spanish from Appalachian State University. So again, thank you, Jared, for being here today. And he has a lovely slideshow to accompany his presentation.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. And thanks for being here this morning, you all. I'm going to share my screen so you all can see. 1 second.
And if you joined late, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and who you're with, just so we can kind of see who's all on the line.
All right. Okay, y'all. So I was asked by Mike and Lindsay to kind of set us up with a little bit of framing for our discussion, and we really want to, leave a solid half hour, 45 minutes to hear from our presenters to have a discussion. But we want to kind of set up, the conversation of, what is a resilient food system? Why do we need to build resilient food systems? And so I'm going to present a few slides. I'm going to try and take like 10 or 15 minutes. I'm not going to talk too fast. I always try to overpack in information, but I want to kind of set us up for this context. So personnel, here we go. Okay, and also I want Mike and I also worked with UNC School of Government recently to organize a webinar and some follow-up office conversations that were about innovative ideas for local government during COVID-19. So I'd love, y'all check out, there's a link here. Please check it out. We can share it out afterwards. But these are great conversations with folks from around the state on how local government is directly engaging in COVID-19 response. So what are food systems? Before we even get to a resilient food system, what are food systems? At its base, food systems are made up of these core components. I'm sure a lot of you all know this. I'm sure some of this information is going to be repetitive to some of you all, but hopefully it'll be some new and informative stuff in here. But these are the basic core components of our food system. Production of food, processing, distribution and sales, consumption of food, and food waste management. And along those different parts of the food system, the supply chain occurs in many different ways. Food is produced in many different ways. It's distributed in different ways. It's consumed and disposed of in different ways. You have pasture-raised beef. You have, feedlot beef. You have mono agriculture, commodity crops. You have diversified agriculture, small market farms, vegetable production. You have pastured chickens. You have indoor mass-produced industrial chickens. You have high intensity slaughter and processing. You have on-farm slaughter and processing in North Carolina, thankfully, under our regulatory structure. So there's just all these different ways. That's just like the tiniest little glimpse into how there's all these different variances throughout that supply chain, different variances in production, different variances in economic sustainability, different variances in economic viability, different variances in environmental impact on value chains and worker value chains. There's a lot of variance throughout this very complex system. And so, what is a resilient food system? At Community Food Strategies, we're on the advisory council for Johns Hopkins Food Policy Networks. They do a lot of amazing work to support food councils and food networks around the country. And they have a food system resilience project right now where they're asking that question, what are the metrics that make a resilient food system? They're working to, with evidence-based technical, to provide evidence-based technical assistance and resources that will help local governments more effectively prepare for and respond to crises that disrupt food security for the residents and ensure a more secure food supply chain for the future. So they're really trying to zero in on what is it that makes it resilient? And I think, if you see this picture above of a sustainable food system, I think, all of these are important factors in, resilience and your ability to, be bounce back from an emergency. And I think connected is a very strong part of that in that graphic. Trusted relationships and connections are just absolutely key to that resilience within the system. So, how do we create resilient systems? I mean, Hopkins is obviously thinking about that in a very evidence-based way, but lots of folks have been working for years to, how improve our local food systems, improve our food systems to make them more resilient. But to really do that, like we have to look at like the history of our food systems. What is the base for our food systems? Where have they come from? Why have we gotten to where we are, where we need this kind of look at resilience? So I'm just going to take us down the brief kind of quick history of food systems in the United States. And, I think we have to really think about the basis of our food systems at its core in America being based on, control of land and control of labor through, slavery, through indentured servitude, through sharecropping. The food system at its core does have a deep root in inequities, particularly through control of land and labor. This is Midway Plantation in Wake County. And I mean, so this legacy is living out today, and it is heavily impacts, the core foundations of like where our food systems have come from. Fast forward to the 1930s in the United States, you wouldn't have a lot of federal policy that, impacted how we create food systems until the 30s. After World War I, with the influx of new, petrochemical products to improve agricultural productivity and really, get out and, plant row to row out west. I mean, we had the Dust Bowl. We had a giant agricultural, disaster that was really affecting our food supply chain drastically and almost collapsed, American agriculture. And out of that came federal policy to fix that, to fix land conservation, to, provide incentives to, to kind of manage how we plant crops and so that farmers don't have economic crashes. And that's kind of set the way for the 1970s. We had Earl Butz as the Secretary of Agriculture in the 70s, really changing agriculture even further with his, really get big or get out policies that were created through the USDA. And it really was a change in how we looked at, agriculture as, a rural way of life. His words were, agriculture is no longer a way of life, it's a business. So it's really about, driving down to, economic drivers of agriculture and creating direct payment subsidies for commodity crops in the 1970s. And that, the impact of those policies are still playing out today on our systems. And ironically, just going back to the racism that is at the core of some of the history of our food systems, Butz had to resign because of racist comments that he made. Going forward into the 1990s, why do we have some farmers who excel and some farmers who don't excel? We have a history of discrimination in USDA loan policies. The Pigford versus Glickman landslide lawsuits in the 90s and 2010s showed that USDA was systemically discriminating against Black farmers for a long time, leading to a lot of land lost by Black farmers and further perpetuating inequities between Black and white farmers and land ownership. That's an important part of understanding who owns land, who is able to, at its core, produce food for this food system. The policies that were laid out by Earl Butz and built upon in the 70s really led to 3 years of consolidation in agriculture across this country. We saw, massive vertical integration of our food production systems and really just a consolidation across the spectrum. And so, we've seen our agriculture shift a lot in North Carolina as a result of that. And then, inherently global forces global market forces have just, created a whole new world of agriculture than it was, 50 years ago. Transport of goods across the world has just created a very complex system that we all are sitting in as, farmers and food producers in North Carolina. So, that original graphic I showed of the food system, it's a very simplified graphic, at its core, it is what it is, but look at this. I mean, the global food system map, oh goodness, that is a very complex system that, our local food systems sit within. And resilience, like, how do you create resilience with this? And I think if you look in the bottom left corner, I'm not sure if you can read it, it's kind of small. There's like these red wiggly lines and it just says resilience. Resistance to shocks is an emergent property of the whole system. So it's like, oh, wow, there's this giant, huge system, this giant global supply chain. It's like, oh, we're trying to figure out how to resist shocks to this. And I think, as we all know, COVID has been that shock that has really shocked this entire system. And so, like, going back to, like, how, like, creating resilient food systems, how can we improve our community food systems? How can we look at access, consumption, disposal, production, transformation, distribution, all these different parts of it in between, and create more resilience so that when these global food supply chains are shocked, we aren't sitting here without access to milk. We aren't sitting here without access to eggs. We aren't sitting here without access to fresh meat. These conversations are now, at the forefront. But it's not new. I mean, in North Carolina, we're very lucky to have had a large ecosystem of people working on these issues for a long time. In North Carolina, we have this 2010 Farm to Fork Guide that was led by the Center for Environmental Farming Systems, laid out recommendations really on how to build the local food economy in North Carolina. They're coming back to this and doing a North Carolina food project right now where it's looking at, how to make North Carolina food resilient across all sectors of food. But in 2010, the recommendation was made, establish a state food policy council, establish local food policy councils. And that work has been done. We have the North Carolina Local Food Council at the state level. We have food councils popping up around the state. We have, many in this region, which I'll talk about. But these groups are really working to build resilience in their food systems. They're working to improve health, food equity, access, natural resource protection, economic development of food around food, emergency response around food, production agriculture, and trying to do that to improve these outcomes for all of these communities, residents and workers. And the foods, in this broad context of, federal policy and globalized food systems, food councils are trying to solve broad food system issues by giving communities more control over the ways they produce, consume, and dispose of food, and give consumers more of a voice in all of those processes. And so who's involved? Really everyone. You all as local government, you all soil and water, public schools, faith, food security, farmers, health professionals. You need to have all these people at the table in trust working together to create the resilience and create these pathways to improve systems. Oh, forgot about my spinny graphics here. Hold on. So what do they do? They work to assess the food system, connect stakeholders, educate leaders in the community, recommend policy and program change. And a lot of times they're doing this with local government at the table. In 2013, Community Food Strategies was formed, as to support this kind of growing network of food councils in North Carolina. We now have organizational support from all these different organizations at the table. We really work to support this network of 36 independent community-based nonprofits, or food councils, I'm sorry, some of whom are nonprofits, some of whom are grassroots. And this is our wonderful team of folks that I get to work with to do that work. And we do that by bringing folks together, by being a champion for food councils and their community work, building alliances, asking questions, bringing people to the table, providing tools and training, offering a network structure for all these folks. And we bring them tools, really, we call them tools for food system organizing, but they're really tools for food system resilience. And we bring these frameworks to them and we help them understand them and integrate them into their work. And the core of that is racial equity. We work a lot with DR Works and the Committee on Racial Equity at CEFS to support groups in embedding a racial equity practice in their food council work and thinking about food through a lens of racial equity. We work to integrate them in a network and systems approach. I mean, that's so important to resilience, like having multiple people together, multiple stakeholders with adaptive leadership that creates an innovative learning environment and people feel comfortable experimenting. That's where innovative things happen and that trust is built. We teach folks about, circle forward, dynamic governance, learning how to use shared leadership methods to be inclusive and bring in everyone's voice to the table and give people shared leadership opportunities so they all have ownership over these discussions. Our group itself is a model of collective impact. We're bringing together all these different organizations to say, how can we at the state level affect, food change, food policy change, food systems change in North Carolina through collective impact model. And we help food councils and communities understand how they can use that model to improve food system outcomes. We teach folks that data is very important, that story and data and really planning for change is absolutely critical to seeing the systems change that we need to create more resilient food systems. And we've supported that network envisioning, having a vision for themselves as a network to create a more resilient and more equitable food system across the state, and supported them in drafting some shared goals, which is, working on partnerships, food access, education, equity, policy, economic opportunity, and community engagement. And this is a kind of up-to-date picture of this network right now. There's around 36 groups. There's a regional group in the triad now. And so this is a little bit old. So there's some newer groups that have come on and some that have waned a little bit. But this group is really heavily interacting now, kind of at a state level. So in the Triangle, you all have these groups working in your communities: Orange County Food Council, Chatham Community Food Council, Capital Area Food Network. The Durham Farm Food Network was working. They're kind of they helped to lead up to decolonizing Durham food system work, and that work is still ongoing. So that group is kind of on hold a bit, but these are resources for you all in this region to work with you. I'm sure many of you have been working with them during this crisis. So I'm just going to wrap up with, a few ways that other communities of these food council groups have been, acting in a way that has added some resilience to their food systems during the time of crisis. This is the Better Chance, A Better Community, also known as ABC2. They're a food council group in Enfield in Halifax, North Carolina. They have a youth food council that heavily engages in civic youth engagement and education. And so during this crisis, they've been engaging their youth and get out the vote, really doing get out the vote measures that are safe using during COVID. They partnered with a local restaurant to make meals for families in need on Saturdays. When school meals were not available. They've been serving about 400 meals a weekend to families and seniors across the county free of charge. And they're now working with Halifax County to fund that project. Halifax County commissioners appreciate it so much they gave them funding to keep it going. They're also working with CFSA and some others on doing free boxes of food that are procured from local folks from their farmers markets who are having trouble with farmers market sales. Now that food is being bought and being distributed directly to folks in need by this group with other partner funding. The Cape Fear Food Council in New Hanover County. They had a lot of existing relationships. They had a lot of existing credibility. They did a lot of emergency response with the hurricanes over the past few years. They had a whole network of emergency providers already on call. They created a phone network beforehand, for hurricane emergency response, and that kicked in during COVID. They also started hosting weekly calls with local government to collect resources that started creating local food assistance guides and assessing the needs for New Hanover, Pender, and Brunswick counties. They launched an online map with resources that were updated after the calls, and they started to host calls around food delivery for populations like seniors and kids that really needed it. And they've initiated a texting campaign to better even do more fast emergency outreach. They also partnered with CFSA on our farm share program through Feast Down East, and they distributed 800 boxes of locally grown produce and meat to out-of-work hospitality and restaurant workers. The Davidson County Local Food Network in Davidson County, Thomasville area, they had strong relationships and networks themselves after doing this work for many years. They were invited to kind of coordinate with Davidson County on emergency response, and all their network connections were really useful in that time. It enabled them to create some Google Maps for food pantries and free meals, as well as local farms really quickly, which the county really appreciated and didn't feel like they would have been able to do so quickly without the connections that the Food Council had. And they're working with Cooperative Extension and the Health Department to distribute home garden kits. They created an online education series for beginning gardeners, and they're working with the city of Lexington to provide resources like topsoil. So that's just 3 examples of outside the triangle of how, all of this work of many years of creating cross-sector relationships, building trust, having conversations, doing community education, doing advocacy, engaging with their city and county governments, has led to, real trust and work that has really paid off during this time of COVID, where people have been able to sit down, know each other, figure out where the resources are when those weren't known, and try to figure out pathways forward to feed people. And so I think, Charles Hopkins has learned a lot, from this experience. And I'm excited to hear from this group more about what you all have learned, because I think, as Lindsay said, everything that has happened is lessons that we need to grow from now, and that we need to document, and that we need to learn from. And we need to have a revitalized commitment to working on our local and regional food systems to make them more equitable, to make them more resilient, so that we can weather this even better the next time it happens, which hopefully will live well. But all right, that's done with me. If you want to chat me at all, please email me and check me out at CFSA and Community Strategies. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Jared. I feel like I just learned so much. You could have your own course at a university or something. But
you got it all in 10 minutes, so hopefully you can hear it.
Yeah. So if anyone does have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll come back to Jared in the at the end with questions specifically for him. But yeah, that was great. One thing I really like that you said is the many years of work it has taken. So, realizing that, this is not an overnight solution, obviously. So these kinds of discussions are obviously the step in the right direction in this movement, so we can be more resilient in the future. But I wanted to also say that we're going to have the 3 other representatives share what they're doing in the Triangle. But before that, a housekeeping item I forgot is that we are recording this video. So Elena's going to put the link to our website where the recording will be. So if you want to go back to it, and we will be sending out all of the resources. So we can send out Jared's presentation and maybe the John Hopkins links and things like that. So look for those in the future. But the next person I'm going to call on is Donna Rewalt. She's with the Durham County Extension. She's the director, and she's just going to take a couple minutes to share some of their experiences through COVID. And she does have a couple slides, so I'm pulling those up right now.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to ask, hi, I'm Donna. I'm actually going to ask Kelly Warnock to start us off. Kelly, just to kind of give you a little idea, when the crisis began, of course, every county appoints a feeding coordinator, but we actually appointed a feeding team, food security team, which is co-led by myself, Kelly Warnock in public health, and Michael Davis in strategic initiatives. So we're just going to tag team here a little bit. And Kelly's going to start us off. If you could, let's see, go back to the very first slide, and then Kelly can have it. Kelly, I assume you're here.
Yep. So I work in public health. I'm a nutrition program manager here over a SNAP Ed grant. And back early March, probably even late February, when we realized that COVID was most likely going to impact the food system, we started just gathering our partners that we've had relationships with for a long time, like Jared said, and started having some meetings over the phone with the food bank and Hunger Durham and such. And then in April, that group actually was formalized by our Emergency Operations Center. They wanted to have a COVID-19 food security task force. So we already had that groundwork started, so it was really easy to mobilize that task force. We started, like Donna said, Michael Davis, myself, and Donna were all appointed co-chairs of the task force, which worked really well because we all have very different networks and also skill sets. And then we started having weekly meetings over Zoom with 50 to 80, I'd say, community partners, feeding agencies, the volunteer center, county commissioners, the mayor, all sorts of different people attended those meetings. And it was we really were resource sharing and information sharing together. And then we moved to, in July, we just moved to every other week meetings as we get into less of an emergency situation and more of a long-term situation. Some of the major accomplishments that have come out of that group, we've been able to connect farmers and food sources with agencies that could store and disseminate the items. For instance, at the very beginning, there was a farmer who had a lot of eggs, and we knew out of the relationships in the network which food pantry had the ability to refrigerate those eggs and then get them out. So we were able to connect them. We also connected a lot of agencies with grant opportunities and assisted with grant writing so they could get more funding. We created, with our volunteer center, we created a volunteer portal for food relief agencies to connect volunteers with those agencies. We assisted agencies with food and COVID-19 safety protocols, food safety protocols. This was really important when Durham Public Schools Foundation took over their feeding operation. We were able to really assist in that. Like one of the groups that Jared talked about, we also created an online interactive map of all the food agencies that's updated weekly with times and locations. If they speak Spanish, there's all sorts of information on that. That was alongside our city GIS agency. We assisted with a plan to reopen our farmers markets. Our farmers markets originally were shut down due to the city ordinance and county ordinance, and so we were able to work to get them reopened safely with some great safety protocols. And Donna can speak more if she wants, but she created a farmers market work group where they meet regularly and share resources and talk about issues that are coming up. We created funding. We created and funded and executed a plan to provide food insecure households who have tested positive. So our public health department calls people who have tested positive every day. And if they don't have financial resources or social resources to get food and supplies, we'll actually deliver those supplies to them and purchase them and get them through partners as well. We are working to secure food to provide at testing sites. So when people come and get tested, they get they'll get food so that they can be isolated at home until they get those test results. We also coordinated funding for meals for seniors in the Latinx community with the assistance of our Board of Commissioners, a couple of who are on this call, and we're so thankful for them. And finally, and I feel like most importantly, we've secured funding for a new food security and policy position so that this work can continue, and we're going to be in a better situation if and when any sort of emergency ever happens again in the future. So, and I think I'm going to pass it back over to Donna, who's going to talk a little bit about like a case study.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I can't say enough about the need for having a food security position. I'd be happy to talk with anyone about that in more detail. We've actually done a lot of research, both locally in the state and across the country, at what that could look like. And that was actually came out of a community-based proposal from In Hunger Durham that had been kind of sharing that idea with both city and county governments for about 3 years, and COVID really showed the need for that. You also may know or have heard of some of our public-private partnerships between our school system and Durham Public Schools Foundation and others who have worked to feed school children and families. So that's another piece. We did not coordinate that directly, but we did work closely with them, and we communicate continuously. As a matter of fact, we're looking right now, that's part of our responsibility, to look at the next steps of what that might look like with schools being virtual, and depending on how USDA makes decisions and how schools can deliver food effectively and how we can support that. So that's another piece that we do address. We thought we'd share just a quick case study. So this is a food pantry, Emmanuel Iglesia Presbyteriana, which wasn't as much on our radar screen initially. They're located in just north of 85 in a very diverse part of Durham with a large range of income levels. And they went from serving approximately a very small number of people to a very large number of people and a very busy area in a very short period of time. They operate a Wednesday afternoon food drive. And Lindsay, if you could advance that slide, that'd be great. So they, so mid-March, they had actually already increased. So their very original numbers, even before that, were somewhere around 150. By mid-March, they were 250, and by mid-June, they were 350 families and individuals. And at the point at which we really started interacting with them through the task force, they actually were turning people away. They had traffic problems. You know, this is a 40% increase, the number of meals they're serving. And they have a great relationship, certainly with the Food Bank of North Carolina, which has been very taxed. And they found that their need and their increase was outpacing their ability to get food in. So if you advance the slide again. And we have a few pictures of their site. They have kind of a church, good old church basement facility, church parking lot on a very busy road. So some of the things we did was we helped them procure a couple of grants and funding. We connected them with the volunteer center, which we mentioned, to recruit volunteers. We also had to deal with the traffic, and this was actually difficult because our police and sheriff were very much tied up with working with our school feeding sites, and yet this site was blocking traffic. So we worked with our emergency operations to provide some consultation and also signage. So they brought in a large billboard type sign to help with traffic. That's actually been an interesting outcome that we found with food pantries, is dealing sometimes with the traffic needs and city and county resources being taxed. We recently actually had a city intern who worked with us to develop some guidance based on best practice for food pantry drive-throughs, which we're starting to disseminate more widely. But that's been an ongoing issue, which we certainly will be looking at for any future emergency operations. And if you just want to advance through these slides, we'll see. I'm trying to remember what else is in there. So there's some more very typical, lots of food, lots of bags, lots of boxes. They serve a large number of Spanish-speaking residents, but they also serve a very large number of African-American and other residents. As I mentioned, it was a very diverse community. And so you can't quite see the traffic. Yeah, there's some of the traffic issues that we were dealing with. So you can see that on a street like this, at a food pantry that's trying to serve 350 people for 3 hours, that they are blocking all kinds of local traffic here. So, and advance it again. Nice, good volunteer picture. Everybody's wearing a mask. Good job, everyone. So a couple of other things I would say we did, and you can go back to the slideshow, was we have done surveying. So one thing we did not have, because we did not have a food security person in place, and our food policy council, as mentioned, is on a little bit of hiatus. We had some great partners who were ready to dive in, but we did have some data needs. We've addressed some of that through surveying our food pantry partners once early on and once recently, where we can again start to deal with needs. And we also did a farmers market survey, which helped us address some gaps in the system. We found some farmers who were wasting food, and we were able to make some connections, some that had immediate food to be distributed, and also anticipated some impending needs as well. So that was also very helpful. I would say one of our good lessons learned is that working as co-leaders, Michael, Kelly, and I working together in different parts of the organization, we meet every single day. So we have a morning conversation every day. I talk about Michael and Kelly like they're members of my family. My family keeps asking me, who are Michael and Kelly again? I'm like, I talk about them every day. And we've had really great working relationships with our public officials who have been very involved and invested in this work. So we've been lucky. I think the one gap that we find that we have, which is very difficult for us to address on the fly, and that's around data. So some of our needs for data are massive right now. So our commissioners and other public officials want to know, where are the hungry people, and where are they today? Like, how do we know that in September we need to feed these people over here versus these people over here? How do we know that seniors in public housing are in need? That one is a pretty easy one for us right now. Seniors of all kinds need to be fed. But that's been an ongoing issue. We've done the best we can with that. We've reached out. But to build an entire data structure and data network while this is going on is virtually impossible. So that we're hoping, I think that's certainly one of the needs for the food security coordination embedded in government as a permanent year-round activity that we hope will make a difference. But that's probably one of our biggest needs that we've struggled with. So hopefully that's helpful, and we'd be happy to discuss more after some point.
Yeah, thank you, ladies. Maybe if you have any other resources or links, you can either send them to me or put them in the chat, or we can distribute.
We have loads of them, and we can share our food pantry data sheet that we just did too.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to call on Deb McGriffin. She's with the Moore County Extension Office, so we can get more of a rural perspective. So hi, Deb. Thanks for being here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm taking a little different perspective. COVID-19 has actually been a boon for our farmers here. Most of our farms, and wait a minute, I can share you a little bit about share or not. See if I can share. I don't know if you can see that or not. This is a little snapshot of Moore County, and you can see that we have a lot of most of our producers are small farms. Our farm average is about 120 acres, and we have a lot of produce in this county. And so this is for so what has happened in Warren County? Most of ordinarily our farmers struggle to sell their produce because of the market. They're limited markets. They sell mostly directly to consumers. They don't aggregate their products because wholesale prices are so low. They have been low for 30 years. And so it doesn't pay them to aggregate and to sell to grocery stores. So instead they sell directly to consumers. This year, consumers are more concerned about where their food comes from and are wanting to buy local foods. So our farmers markets and our small producers who have farm stands or have pick your own, taking this to heart. They've taken all the precautions they should, all the safety precautions that NC State recommends that they follow, and the markets are selling out. The farmers markets on a weekly basis are selling out. Our farm stands are selling out. For example, we've got a peach farm right down the road from my office, and if you're not there by noon, you're not going to get any peaches. So it's a good thing. The worrisome thing, though, is that what happens when this is over as far as the farms are concerned. They are concerned that they want to keep local interest in local foods continuing. Any other I guess the hang up we're having are some of our livestock producers. Now, most of our livestock producers here are independent producers, and they all have to go to a processor. The processors are booked up until next August. So livestock producers are either having to hang on to their livestock, which is going to affect the quality. We've got a lot of chicken farms that are aggregating to some of the big companies like Pilgrim's Pride. Most of those have not been affected. I know you've heard a lot in the news where or these processors are having to shut down because of COVID, and so the meat gets the flocks have to be destroyed. That has not affected many of our producers. Most of our producers, what happens is this year, what happens is in between flocks, there's like a 3 or 4 week waiting period before a producer gets a new flock to raise. And so during that time, it just so happened that Pilgrim's Pride was shut down during the time that producers were between flocks. So it didn't really affect them, although it affected other producers across the country. So Moore County's in a good situation as far as our farms are concerned. Our biggest worry is farmland preservation. Developers coming in and swiping up farms, primarily because farmers are aging out and they'd like to pass their farmland on, but there are no heirs that are interested, so they end up selling. And if you've ever been to Moore County and you drive through the county, you will find a development in the middle of nowhere, which is I kind of find bizarre, but it's because they've got to do something with their land when they retire. And so that's a big worry for Moore County, is maintaining farmland and preserving it and bringing in new farmers that can take over farms that are interested and can afford to take it over, because it's also a affordability issue.
Thank you, Deb. Are you done?
I'm done.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, we'll wait for questions at the end. The last person I'm going to call on is Penny Rich. She's an Orange County Board of Commissioner. So welcome, Penny.
Hi, and thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, awesome. So yeah, my name is Penny Rich, and I am the chair of the county commissioners in Orange County. And I am happy to say that Mike Ortowski belongs to us, and no one can steal him, please. He has been extremely helpful through this, but it is interesting that you look at your staff and managers and people that work in county government, and on a regular basis, you don't recognize everything they're doing. But then when you hit a pandemic, they really shine. And Mike has absolutely been shining. So thank you, Mike. I know you're out there. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about what happened in Orange County, and then talk about some of our solutions. I do not have any slides, so it's just my face. Sorry, y'all. And I am getting my windows cleaned outside in my complex, so occasionally you might hear some noise, and that's where that's coming from. So first of all, we had our supply system was affected when the pandemic hit. Commercial food services obviously down. Restaurants, universities, hospitals no longer needed the food. However, we found that consumers did need the food because they started cooking more at home. And so they started doing something that we called pandemic buying, like toilet paper disappearing. All of a sudden, food was disappearing off the shelves, and we couldn't get enough food on the shelves quick enough to make sure that people had what they needed. So this really did illuminate some of the gaps and inequities in the food system. And along with that, created anxiety and a sudden awareness of really how food comes to our table. So, Mike and the ag department just started going into action immediately. Some of our farmers markets did close. Some of them were able to stay open. And so that kind of eased people's mind. I know in Carrboro, they immediately went into action and found a safe way to keep the flow of business, making sure that some of these the foods that you would normally just go up and choose and pick yourself were already boxed up, and people appreciated that because they still wanted to get their farm fresh produce. So some of the other solutions that we worked on is to really talk with our local growers and see how do we get these, these boxed up deliveries ready to roll, consumer ready boxed up deliveries. That's what people were expecting. So that included the vegetables, some dairy, meats, and eggs. And we were lucky enough to be able to set up some e-commerce and farm pickup systems with some of our farmers. And I know Orange County is, you think of Orange County, or you go right to Chapel Hill and you think of, the university and sort of like a suburban setting. But Orange County is mostly a rural county with lots of farms on it. So we were able to work with these farmers and set up, help them set up systems, which was just absolutely great. So the distribution began with all this with all these new methods, and we took note of that on how quickly we shifted from a farmer's market to like these sort of CSA kind of boxes. Grocers like Weaver Street were always fantastic. They moved right away before even the demand for wearing masks or any other sort of rules were put in place. Weaver Street was on top of it. And so there was also a huge demand for restaurants to set up online and curbside pickup, and as well as, what was our traditional grocery stores, what they were doing. Another solution that came out of Carrboro was called Carrboro United, and this was a local collaboration between restaurants. And they set up this really an innovative food hub model for local food and aggregated pickup. So a lot of restaurants joined in with Carrboro United. They set up these 2 refrigerated trucks in the parking lot where the Cat's Cradle is, and you would just drive through and pick up the food that you had ordered online and paid for online. Somewhat seamless. You open the back of your car, they pop the food in, and you drive off. And now we're talking about folks that can actually afford services like this. Let's shift a little bit and talk to people that were at risk. So people that were at risk before were even more at risk after the pandemic. So they somehow knew how to navigate the system, but now the system even got more confusing and concerning for them. More and more people needed food services that weren't, that we knew that they existed, but I think someone else said that you don't actually have that data. So we don't. I mean, we know who's on it was in our SNAP program, food stamps, like goes back and forth with names. We know the need from social services, but we don't have the regular data on a daily basis of who is needing food. So that is something that I think that all of us need to work on. I think that's so vitally important. I want to talk a little bit about our food council. The Orange County Food Council is unique in that it is not a nonprofit. It is run through county and town government. We all support the Food Council and have different appointments on that council, including government, Mike's department, growers, anyone that you can think of that is food related, the schools. And we have a successful food council in that we have all these different areas that are focused on. So the food council went to work immediately. They started meeting weekly to address the food access, local economy issues. We worked with the North Carolina Extension, Orange County Economic Development, and interestingly enough, right before the pandemic hit, our food council coordinator went on maternity leave and gave birth to twins. And so we were kind of, again, looking for that need for leadership. And Mike, I want to say Mike stepped up to that. So again, thank you, Mike. As well as that, we had, of course, we all set up our EOCs, our emergency operations centers. And in Orange County, we have 17 different teams. And one of those teams are our agricultural natural resources team, which works on access issues, accessing food security, as well as working on housing and human services. They all interlink when that need is there. And so the Department of Social Services also began mass feeding services, and we worked with the Eastern North Carolina Food Bank resources, and also with our Orange County producers. With the CARES Act, we had a good amount of money that we used for purchasing food that we can give to folks. And we worked with local farmers and had some biweekly distributions. And we're going to continue to do that, hopefully through the end of the year with that CARES Act money. We had established a weekly, if not biweekly, distribution of food. A lot of the places that we set up these food distributions were in schools themselves. At the beginning, we did have some of the school buses actually drive around and deliver food. And now we just have people come. And I know we were talking about traffic in Durham. We're actually doing the food distribution at the schools in parking lots. So it makes that part of the traffic a little bit easier. We do have also Orange County set up a pandemic related emergency financial assistance. And that came in two phases. Round one went out immediately. That was about $300,000, $400,000. And those were loans and grants that were given out to not only small businesses, but agricultural ventures. And then we had a second round, and there were that was about $520,000. And again, that was small business and ag adventures. We also had, in addition to that, we have our agricultural grant program. And we were able to push that money out as well. That was about $540,000 to help our farmers to make sure that we were continuing to receive their goods and get those out, not only for sale, but for giving to folks that were in need. So where are we now? We're moving from our emergency response to a long-term recovery plan. And Mike is working with, as our economic development office, is working with chambers and nonprofits. As you know, Mike has also been very involved with the COG as well as the UNC School of Government. And so we continue having roundtable discussions and trying to bring everyone to the table that we need to help us, continue as we are flying the plane and building at the same time. We're trying to continue helping people and understand what the how do we create this resilient system. So even after the pandemic is over in say late 2021, sorry y'all, got to keep up with those masks. We'll have a better idea of how to handle the next. I don't want to say pandemic, but emergency situation. So we are actually writing the script now. We always talk about not reinventing the wheel. Well, we are inventing the wheel now. So we need everybody's help. We need everyone to collaborate. The goal, of course, is to learn from what we're doing. And it is a time to learn because, again, we haven't done this before. So we need to think about, food distribution. How is it equitable? How can sharing be done more, not only in county, but county to county, region to region, and then, of course, across our whole state? As leaders in our county, we need to think about policy. I think sometimes we get very comfortable in what we're doing, and we don't go back and review policy, and we need to. We have to figure out more about funding and how important that is. I know when we first started structuring the Orange County Food Council, we had a lot of pushback, and pushback from some of our nonprofits and pushback from some of our town leaders. And I think that it wasn't necessarily against the Food Council. It was just not understanding what the Food Council does and what its role is. So it's important to educate people and send that message as well. Partnerships, like I said, are vitally important. And then also the infrastructure. What is our infrastructure? What do we need to work on that infrastructure? And how do we keep that and promote it? And how do we create this new system? Because, quite frankly, our system is fine if we have the status quo, but the status quo we know can disappear quickly. So we need to think about what new food systems looks like, and what really does a resilient food system look like. So with that, I'm gonna stop. I know we're towards our end, and it's 11 o'clock, and I know you want to keep up for time for questions. But if anyone has any questions for me or Mike, we can be reached on the our Orange County website. You can also look at our Food Council on the Orange County website. And we're happy to answer anything. I know Mike is out there and will help me answer questions as well. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Penny. And we can include everyone's emails too. So if you have a specific question towards like Penny or Jared or Deb, Donna, and Kelly, you can ask them via email. We'll send that in the follow-up email. So again, thank you for everyone who presented. It's been extremely informative, and it sounds like everyone is doing great work. Did anyone have any questions for any of the presenters? You can either ask in the chat or vocally.
Hey, Lindsay, this is Sig Hutchinson, and I might just make a few comments from as a Wake County Commissioner's perspective, if that's okay. And that I really, really appreciate your putting this together and the comments. And Jared, I think your comments were particularly meaningful just in terms of everything that's going on in the community. As a commissioner, I've worked with Penny and Heidi and a lot of the other commissioners to help move this local food movement forward, and particularly pleased with Mike Ortosky. And Penny, to your point, we would love to have Mike, but I understand your willingness to try to keep him as much as you can. Let me just say that I'm quite encouraged. This seems to be such difficult work, and it seems to be so slow, but we seem to be making progress. And to that point, Jared, I really appreciate your comments to give us a sense of what's actually going on in the state. And as Penny said, a lot of our work is around policy, but the thing that I would offer is I think there needs to be more conversations and emphasis around creating some type of organization or structure that can continue to advocate and coordinate with the regional efforts going on. And Lindsay, I want to offer up, I don't know if this is a place for TJ to jump in and play more of a role. I would love to be a champion for supporting your efforts to bring TJ into this. Mike and I have been in lots of conversations. It's just so hard to find an organization that can really do this work, but it seems TJ could be a vehicle for that. The other thing that I would offer is, I don't know if there's an opportunity to start a conversation with the other COGs around the state to see about a food coordinator in light of where we are, and particularly with the COVID situation that really creates this opportunity to do even more. But if the COGs could create some FTE or an individual who could focus around food, and then us collectively, maybe TJ Cog leading the effort to bring in all the COGs and start working with Jared and his group to expand this out, I think this is our future. And obviously, we never want to let a crisis go to waste. And with this COVID situation, here we've got a perfect opportunity to catapult us forward. I mean, we've been working on this for 20 years, but we really have a chance to make some significant changes here. And I really think we need to leverage it, and maybe the COG might be the way to do this. So thank you so much. I've learned so much, and I really appreciate your opportunity for the opportunity to be with you today and to learn everything that I did.
Thank you, Sig, for your comments. Yeah, I just wanted to add, and this was actually one of the key takeaways that I was going to say at the end of the discussion, but it seems like partnership seems to be a constant theme throughout this, intergovernmentally, public-private. And one of the main initiatives that I'm working on is what's called our Regional Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, so CEDS, CEDS for short. Deb McGiffin's actually on my steering committee, but basically, within that document, one of the goals will be to prioritize regional food systems. So now that we have this designation as an economic development district through our federal partner, EDA, Economic Development Administration, we have more staff time allocated to be able to go out and pursue opportunities like this. It may not be as to the extent of some of the other COGs, like Piedmont Triad has a position designated just to a food officer or whatever type of position, but they received an additional grant. But there are definitely opportunities. Mike and I were discussing back in May about applying for a USDA regional grant. So looking in the future, TJ Cog is interested in definitely playing a role. I've also spoke with Megan Boljak, who is one of Jared's teammates on the community food strategies. With the 3 food councils in our region, we've talked about how we can sort of integrate goals and action plans into one vision possibly in the future. So there are some discussions going, and hopefully looking forward to advancing them in the near future, hopefully. But thank you again for your thoughts. And yeah, I want to respect people's time. So we have about 10 more minutes. If others did have any questions for any of our presenters, or if you wanted to speak up and share a lesson learned or a success story over the last few months, we'd be happy to hear about them. And if no one has any questions, Jared or Mike, did you have any comments that you wanted to add?
Yeah, Lindsay, this is Mike. Thank you guys so much for hosting this. It's been something we've been talking about for a while, so I really, really appreciate that. I think it was great, and hopefully it's the first of several. I do think that, food systems like watersheds, they don't stop at a geopolitical boundary, and I think a regional effort is key, whether it's the food councils or policy and funding and infrastructure, as Penny mentioned. So this is the beginning of that sort of thing. And I agree with Sig. It's leveraging a crisis. You know, we talk about how do we change our food system or anything, affordable housing, you name it. And I always rile people up when I say this, but we kind of get the system we want. We all vote with our dollars. And I think what you have to do is you can't work on just changing demand or the business response to our demand. You have to start with values. Values create demand, and demand creates a response by business and our built environment. So our values are kind of written on the landscape. So this is a real opportunity. We've all been involved in changing values over time regarding local and regional food and healthy food. It's moved slowly, but right now, as several people mentioned, it's a critical time to be able to sort of leverage this, everybody's awareness. I agree that in Orange County, our small growers who have consumer-ready product, they've seen a 2-3x increase in demand. So it's been hard on some businesses and others, but it does indicate an awareness of this. So it's time to act. And as Penny mentioned, in policy making opportunities, new partnerships, infrastructure, funding, not just county and state funding, but there's a lot of philanthropic organizations looking to fund things. So if we can organize in a way that we can be seen regionally as an entity, whatever that entity is, that can receive funding, I think we can help attract businesses, grow businesses that do buy locally. And there's just a different awareness currently. And to Sig's point, I think the idea of beginning to sort of designate or create positions in the region and beyond that could sort of begin to act as a sort of like the position I'm in and others in other counties to sort of act as almost like an economic and community development partnership around regional food. So I think beginning to kind of share this ongoing and with one voice is really important. So thanks for what you guys are doing and what everybody's doing out there.
Thanks, Mike. And again, Mike was very involved with helping to plan this event. So I appreciate your help and your involvement. Again, I'm sort of new to this area and I'm learning that this is a very passionate group of people. So I'm really excited to see where it goes. Jared, did you have any last remarks?
No, not at all. I just really appreciate everyone's comments here. And I think, Sig, you just nailed it on the head. I think, TJCOG having the capacity to engage and bring convenience like this is wonderful. And we have to create that capacity with some type of funding because it's not inherently built into their work plan. And so figuring out how we could do this at the state level, I think we have this, network of COGs that are engaging more and more in food system, and both the North Carolina Planning Association and American Planning Association are really committed to that work. And so I think it's prime time with COVID to really engage them in something in the next level. So I just really appreciate Sig's comments.
Okay. Sorry.
Lindsay, I would just say one last thing. We can't do it here. We can't do it anywhere. With organizations like this, honestly, around the country, North Carolina is seen as a leader, and within North Carolina, certainly this area is. Folks like CFSA, Community Food Strategies, all of that, CEFs, all the university efforts, especially in the Triangle area, and with leadership like COG and all of the electeds and everything, it really is truly a unique area and a unique time to take advantage of this opportunity.
And I will say that if anyone finds any opportunities where they see that the COG could be the leader or like a grant opportunity or just any sort of discussion to spark a future partnership, we're always happy to sit down and talk about ideas and see what role we can play. Well, again, thank you to everyone for being here. It's been really great. I know a lot of people are privately messaging myself and Elena saying they want a second discussion where we can possibly talk further about coordinating with one another. So definitely we'll pursue an opportunity like that, and we will be sending out a follow-up email with all of the resources. Again, they'll be attached to our website that Elena included in the chat. And we do have a recording, and I will be saving the chat messages as well. So you guys will have access to all of those items, and as well as the emails of all of our presenters. So if you have a specific question for them, you can reach out. But again, thank you, everyone, and happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Bye, y'all.
Thank you, Lindsay. Wonderful event. Appreciate it.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Lindsay,
Hi.
I saved the chat, so you're set.
Oh, I don't have to do anything?
I thought that you had to do it, but you don't. I did it, so I'll just send it to you.
Okay, I just copied and pasted it to my email
That works, yeah.
just in case. But so what does it do when you save it?
So if you go to file, go up to the top, everyone's hearing us do this, but file and then save,
Okay.
and then there's chat.